On today's show, it is part 2 of 2 with Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops and the Game Theory podcast, talking all things NBA drafts. And here we go.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1723 of Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you deep into the evening here, going into Memorial Day weekend. And today's podcast is actually going to be part 2 of 2 with myself and Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops, as well as the Game Theory podcast, talking all things NBA draft. Again, this is part 2 of 2. So if you missed part 1, I would start there. That's the place to begin this conversation. We're going wall to wall in the NBA draft because there's only about a month to go until the draft actually arrives. Stay tuned for all that. And also want to tell you at the top of the podcast that today's podcast is brought to you by folks at LinkedIn Jobs. Help you find the most qualified candidates you want to talk to, help you do it faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Also want to tell you at the top of the podcast, to make it your first listen each and every day, please subscribe to the Locked On Hawks podcast anywhere you might find your podcasts. That includes YouTube, that includes Apple and Spotify, as well as Overcast. And again, anywhere you might find podcasts, just search Locked On Hawks. And without any further delay, here we go. We'll dive back in part 2 of 2 with myself and Bryce Simon. I want to ask you, I know you guys did a full breakdown of the Risacher second breakout, whatever it was, earlier this week. He had a really big game, and it was well timed for him. As soon as the draft cycle kind of shines on him, he has this huge game. But he's the other guy that I think if you took a poll, like he's the closest guy to Sarr on a lot of people's board. I think ESPN still has him number 1 overall on their board, for instance. Yeah. What do you make of that whole experience? Because I have seen wildly divergent opinions on Zaccharie Risacher. Not that anybody hates him, but it's more like this guy's a role player versus this guy could be worthy of the number 1 overall pick, and that's a very generalized breakdown, but you know what I mean? There's a little bit of a gap there on like what people make of him.
Yeah, and just for some reference, I think it was on the recording last night, Sam said that, when he's talked to people, Risacher is usually the second name that comes up after Alex Sarr. He is number 3 on my board. And like I said, at one point when he was shooting 45% from 3, it's like, this is probably the number 1 pick in this draft. Whenever you're talking about a 6'9", 6'10" wing forward who at the time was 18 years old, playing in a professional league, shooting 45% from 3, it's hard to pass that up because he also has real defensive, potential as well. If you guys go watch the breakdown on YouTube, me and Sam were pretty critical in that breakdown of his off the ball defense, which surprised us because throughout most of the season we were somewhat impressed, but he will get down and guard on the ball. Listen, I know people hate coach speak and like these cliches and all. I have it in my notes and he just plays the game the right way, in my opinion. I feel like he understands the game. We broke down a couple of clips of him rebounding and like on a defensive board, the offensive player was going to come down with it. He wasn't the one boxing it out. He was outside and he came in, he just tipped it away to his teammate. He doesn't get a box score stat for that. He doesn't get a rebound, but it kept the offense from a second possession. You could see him reading the ball off the rim for an offensive rebound. He is very much an off the ball player and probably not an upside of a 25 to 30 point per night scorer. But in this draft, if I have a 6'9", 6'10" wing forward who's going to shoot 38 to 40% from 3, defend, rebound, cut, all of those things, that's hard for me to pass up, to be quite honest.
Right. And I think that's not to keep bringing everything back to this draft class, but it's a little bit of a different calculus because, again, he's another guy where it's like this guy does not look like a number 1 overall pick to a lot of people. No. And I understand why. It's the same for me. I have the same thought, but it's just like if there isn't a number 1 overall pick, he might be the guy that you like the most. And
let me throw this at you real quick because you brought up the Zubac comp for Donovan Clingan. I had a scout say to me, "Can you draft French Trey Murphy III at number 1?"
I heard like Prime Otto Porter as a comparison too. Very similar. Like
So I mean,
and Otto Porter was a $30 million player at one point. Like he got people think of him like being old and bad. Like younger Otto Porter was really good. Same with Trey Murphy. Everybody loves Trey Murphy.
Yeah, I mean, Trey Murphy shoots 39% from 3 this year. So, 39% from 3 on almost 6 attempts a game, but not a guy that gets a lot of assists, doesn't turn it over either. I think his defense is fine, but it's not Herb Jones defense. He's valuable because of his size and his athleticism. I would say looking at this, I would hope Risacher is a little bit more impactful of a rebounder. But yeah, I mean, I don't hate that comparison. But again, like if you're telling me Trey Murphy, I can use that on my team.
Of course.
Like, and that's a 16-game player that helps you in the playoffs. Like when I say 16-game player, I'm saying, saying a playoff level player, that's a guy that stays on the floor for you in the playoffs.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, like, we could talk about him forever, and we won't, but defensively, you mentioned, I agree with you on Murphy. He's just kind of okay.
Yeah.
What do you think Risacher is going to be defensively? Because you mentioned the off-ball stuff, but like, let's say a good outcome for him defensively. Is he going to be someone you can be, okay, for instance, we'll put it in the Hawks standpoint. If him and Jalen Johnson are your forwards, I feel like you're feeling pretty good defensively, but neither one of them is probably like an absolute stopper. I don't know what that looks like as far as like what his range is defensively overall.
Yeah, I don't think he's ever all NBA level. Like when we're talking Sarr, Clingan, we're talking all, defensive.
All defense.
Stuff. Yeah. Whenever we talk Stephon Castle, we're talking all defense level potential on that end of the floor. I don't think that's Risacher. I think Risacher I think he's going to be good at the point of attack. Like he's not going to chase Steph Curry or, on the same team, but Trae Young around.
And he's so long. I mean, the height, the length that he has, you don't have to be that much of a point of attack guy. You can probably hold in the wing.
Yeah, and we broke down a clip where he was like right at the circle, the charge circle. Pass is out to the wing, and there's just a one more. So like a driving kick, and then the one more pass is going. And he was able to close out and contest that shot and keep it from getting off. And that's just athleticism, length, those type of things. And I think he does compete on that end of the floor. So this isn't a lockdown defender. It's not Lou Dort or Jaden. I don't think he's Jaden McDaniels even defensively, right? Like maybe that's a comp people would want to use as like a, when you say 3-and-D, I don't think he's that level of defender. I think he's a very good defender. You pair him with another very good defender, I think you can start to really figure that out.
This show is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for a small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the roles you have available, and that's why LinkedIn Jobs is a fantastic option for you. They have the tools that you're looking for to find the right professionals for your team. They help you do it faster, and they help you to do it for free. I'm really been on the hunt for people to hire in my day job for several times in the past for years now. And the folks at LinkedIn Jobs have been huge in making the entire process easier and much more efficient for me. Then with small businesses, they're also wearing a ton of different hats. You might not have the time or resources that you need to perfectly hire someone. And they are not just another job board, though, at LinkedIn Jobs. They have a network of more than 1 billion professionals. That makes it the best possible place to find someone to hire. It gives you access to professionals that you can't find anywhere else, and they do it all, making the process easy and intuitive for you. Hiring is so much easier when you have that many qualified candidates available for your roles. So easy, in fact, that 86% of businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. They're also finding ways to make the process easier for you at LinkedIn Jobs, and 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn Jobs for hiring purposes. Post your job for free by going to linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That is linkedin.com/lockedonnba. Terms and conditions apply. And on offense, do you buy the shooting?
I do.
I'm not, it's more of like a question of like how much you buy. Because I think everybody thinks he's a good shooter, but there was that stretch that I think you referenced earlier about him shooting like in the mid 40s for a while, and he really cooled off. I feel like he kind of has to be a really good shooter to justify this spot. I don't know if that makes sense, but
no, I think it's more than fair. Here's where I'm at with. And again, I'm sorry to keep like referencing what we did, but
that's fine.
We really broke down his footwork and some things, and I'm not super concerned. Like, I think it's something he can fix, but he's shooting over a 60-game sample now. And again, maybe I'm carrying too much weight in these young kids playing in professional leagues, but he's shooting 40% on 3.6 attempts over 60 games.
Right.
Like I saw someone today like critiquing Reed Shepherd, which I don't agree with, but the sample size of his 3-point attempts in 1 year at Kentucky and all of that wasn't enough to say he's an elite shooter. I don't agree with that, but okay. This kid has 60 games in a pro league against, like you say, professionals. In that particular game, his primary matchup was, a guy that was taken in the second round by the Celtics a couple years ago. So I think the jumper also looks good. Like up top, he has real good off-ball relocate. When I say he's a true off-the-ball player, it's not necessarily a negative. It's he cuts well. He anticipates offensive rebounds. He relocates along the three-point line and knows where to be to get those shots off. And this was a playoff game we're talking about. He scored 28 in a playoff game, hit 5 threes. And I think the offensive upside I think he's going to shoot. So what it comes down to is, can he attack a closeout? And if he's able to attack the closeout, can he do anything after that? Can he make a pass? Can he finish at the rim? Because if he can't do those things, then you're really talking about a guy who doesn't look like a number 1 overall pick. Functional player, role player, good player, but you're going to end up being a little disappointed.
I'm going to let you choose your own adventure for a second now. You mentioned your number 1 guy, your number 3 guy, Risacher. Who's in between them on your board?
Topic. I like Topic.
Okay, so before you dive in, is that a guy that the Hawks could reasonably draft if they plan to keep Trae Young?
I don't think so.
Me either.
I listen, I have this conversation with he's one of my good friends. He produces the podcast that we do he's been with me almost since I started, when literally we were getting like no downloads as Motor City Hoops podcast. And we've grown this thing out. And we talk probably once a week about Topic in Detroit. And I'm just like, he's an on-ball guy. Like, I think he's like, if you're drafting Nikola Topic, especially in the top 5, top 3, whatever, it's because you believe in him running your offense, running a ton of pick and rolls for him, and, just believing in his ability to manipulate those, eye manipulation, all of those things. And so I like him, but Ron Holland is the same for me. I have Ron Holland higher on my board than what I think he's actually going to go, because some of the fit stuff really starts to play in with those guys.
Yeah, I mean, and it doesn't mean we have to ignore Topic, but I feel like I'm going to talk about him so much less because of what you just said, because we agree. Yeah. I think he's an on-ball player. Because, I mean, I had someone ask me the other day offline, someone I trust. It's like, okay, let's assume they trade Trae, but they want to keep DeJounte. It's like, I still wouldn't take, because I think we've seen DeJounte as an on-ball player as well, and that still doesn't work for me. So it's like, I feel bad not talking about Topic more, but I think we were just in alignment there. And if they were to do it and shock the world, maybe they just fall in love with him. Like, okay, but then it's like, okay, then the rest of your decision-making process have to be, go ahead.
Real quick. So I'm doing right now for the Basketball Bulletin, the Substack I do with Trevor Lane and Keith Smith. We're doing a mock draft where we are allowing trades. This is the first time. So it's taking a while. Yep. The Hawks have completely rebuilt. Like, I'm not going to say the trades right now, but they've traded Trae Young and DeJounte Murray, and we're 5 picks in. And here's what's crazy. Topic has been on the board for they ended up with 3 picks in the top 5. Got to find my camera here.
Full blown rebuild. Yeah.
Full blown. And they still, I was sure that Topic was going to be the guy. And it's been amazing. I'm excited for it to drop, because I can't wait to see what Hawks fans think of it whenever it comes out, and the return they get for those guys and where they end up. But yeah, listen, I like Topic. I want him to go to, San Antonio would make sense.
Sure.
Washington, I think, makes a ton of sense for him. But then here's what the thing. You get past those teams, I don't think Detroit takes him. I don't think Charlotte, Portland doesn't take him. San Antonio's back on the clock. Memphis doesn't. Probably by the time you get to Utah, Chicago, it's like, hey, like, this is the guy that's too good for us not to take. Right. But this is where this thing gets real interesting really fast.
Yeah, if you're an on-ball player like that, it's the same kind of goes for Dillingham on a lot of ways. Like, you got to have the right team for him. Reed's a little different because Reed can play more off the ball, but
agreed. There's
also a split on him and size-wise, and we talked about them guys earlier. I don't mean to repeat it, but I haven't removed them from my discussion about the Hawks number 1 overall, but it's like I can't really see them them doing it.
Yeah.
So there's that. Okay, there's 3 guys we haven't talked about that are on that list of guys.
Okay, sure.
Steph Castle came up before. So Steph Castle reportedly is telling teams that he's a point guard and wants to play point guard. Now, in theory, that would kind of disqualify him from Atlanta because, that's the reality. But I like Steph Castle. I think you do too. Let's just forget he said that for a second. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'd be pretty intrigued by. I'm not saying number 1 overall. I'd be pretty intrigued by Steph Castle with Trae Young. I think those guys would actually make a lot of sense together, given what Steph Castle does defensively. But what do you make of the player? Because I think I haven't checked recently. I know the Ringer at one point recently had him number 1 on their board. So there's a national app that has him number 1. Point guard stuff aside, what do you think of Steph Castle? And is he a point guard? I guess also matters.
Yeah, so he's number 5 on my board. I think Sam actually likes him more than me. I've warmed up to the idea of, like, if the Hawks were going to trade DeJounte Murray and him playing off of Trae Young makes a little bit of sense. And again, like, I'm sorry to come on a Hawks podcast and reference the Pistons, a team that sucked.
You cover the Pistons. It's fine.
I know, but and it's because, though, it's like, okay, would Steph Castle make sense next to Cade Cunningham? And for some of the reasons you mentioned, I'm like, yeah, he takes the primary perimeter matchups defensively. I like that. He's really smart. He can play off the ball, cut, offensive rebound, all of those things. And then he's the secondary creator, like in bench units or on the second side. The floor spacing is a real question. I'm sure we'll talk about it eventually. So because of that, I could see him being in play. Just for me, let's say you don't want to draft a big for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Well, then I'm taking Risacher. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't need to get to Castle because I'll take Risacher in this situation. I do think that Steph Castle is the best perimeter defender at the top of this draft. Now, like, when you want to get later on, like, Ryan Dunn has an argument whenever
I love Ryan Dunn so much.
Yeah. So there's when you're talking just top 10, Steph Castle can really guard. And I will say this, I evaluated him as a point guard coming out of high school. That's what I thought he was going to be. And it just didn't materialize at Connecticut. I don't know why. I can understand if he wants to go back to that. I don't know where I'm at. If that's where I think I'm seeing more value as him, like a second side creator, off ball player, because he can do those things, especially if he can shoot a little bit. And then, like I said earlier, like maybe he's your second unit point guard.
Yeah, and the shooting is the big question. I mean, I could form a pretty easy, coherent presentation to tell you to take Castle if I assume he could shoot. And it's just that I don't think you can. It's a hard assumption to make based on what we've seen so far. I'm not saying it can't happen, but anytime. And look, I'm a sucker. I'm a sucker for the guys who I hope you cross your fingers and you hope they shoot. They do everything else. I will admit that I'm a sucker for those guys. But with Castle, it's like, man, I don't know if I believe it. I mean, I think it's possible, but if you haven't, so let's just say in the hypothetical world, you have him number one, you have to think he's going to be able to shoot, right? You can't get there otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, me and Sam have had this. Usually, we debate Ron Holland versus Steph Castle, who has the highest, who has the higher ceiling.
We can do it right now.
Yeah, who has the higher ceiling if they can shoot? Just for reference, I looked it up real quick. Risacher has taken over 200 threes this season. Castle took 75, and so it's
in college
threes. Yeah. And so, like, there's just a difference there. And here's the other thing. And this is why this is the first year I've done this, where I've done my research and my homework. Like, I've already started scouting 2025 guys for next season because I want foundation. I want to know what they were in high school to see, did they improve, what carried over, what didn't. Like, we'll talk about that with Matas as well. Yeah. Castle's jump shot was a question coming out of high school also. And so, like, that's why it concerns me a little bit more is there was a question in high school. I think there's a weird hitch with it. And we also saw him, like, lose confidence. And when you're losing confidence, you're on the best team in the country. Like, you have potentially 3 first-round picks and a couple more, maybe second-round picks. And there were times he refused. Like, I watched him travel because he refused to shoot the ball. That concerns me a little bit. Now, I don't know the kid. The intel is really good. Maybe it was just freshman thing and whatever. And again, that's where a lot of this stuff happens behind the scenes. We don't know. But if there's questions about his confidence around it, then I wonder whether it actually comes around to the level that you need it to.
Yeah, you could argue, and I've actually heard this argument from somebody that I trust, but it's also a guess. Like, maybe because he was at UConn and they were playing for the national title.
Okay, sure.
The freedom wasn't there that you might have had somewhere else. I can see both sides, because, like, on one hand, he was able to contribute to an awesome college team. Yeah, and a lot of guys couldn't have done that as freshmen. So that's the more optimistic viewpoint. I'm not sure where I fall, to be honest with you. I don't want to make too much. I don't love the I am a point guard thing, to be honest with you.
I don't.
If that's real, I don't love that.
I don't either. And so, like, we've done this with a couple other players. I've had someone throw out, like, look how impactful Josh Hart is for the Knicks. Yeah. And I'm not saying that's a 1-to-1 comp, but, when we talk about Zubac for Clingan and we talk about Trey Murphy for Zaccharie Risacher, now with, Steph Castle, it's like, okay, is Josh Hart, a number 1 pick? Like, are you happy if that's what you get? Now, I also want to give this caveat. Josh Hart is Josh Hart because there's just a crazy, insane competitiveness and for what he does. And so that's almost not even fair to Castle compared to the other two. But
no, I get that for sure. And it's just, you're trying to be realistic of what the guy's average outcome. Like, obviously, his ceiling is higher than that. We all know, we understand that. I'm just, yeah, go ahead.
So that's what I always get frustrated with the ceiling, and I'm sure I do it, the ceiling floor thing, because
we all do it.
Like,
yeah.
Tell me the percentage chance, right? Like, it's like Rob Dillingham's ceiling may be higher than anybody's, but percentage chance he actually hits that, to me, is much lower than Steph Castle hitting whatever his ceiling is, which may be a little bit low. You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
We got to put the extra caveat in. Yeah, like Dillingham could be Tyrese Maxey. What percentage chance is there that he's Tyrese Maxey? How many of these little guys, pan out? And I don't mean to crap on Rob Dillingham. I think he's an incredible offensive talent.
Same.
But the NBA is what it is in terms of size and athleticism and defense and all of those type of things.
Today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors, and passion, drive, and patience is the formula with winning championships. It's also the formula for keeping your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level up to peak performance as well. They have superchargers, they have roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights. The list goes on and on and on with things that you can get for your car or truck at eBay Motors, whether you're into power, speed, or style. They have you covered across the board at eBay Motors. They have over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find the best possible thing that you're looking for, exactly what you're looking for in real time. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your parts guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money's coming back to you, because with eBay Motors, you are burning rubber. You are not, though, burning cash. With all the parts that you need, the price that you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win that you are seeking. Keep your ride or die alive right now at ebaymotors.com. One more time, the URL is ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. We've also seen the league pretty harshly go against small guards.
Yes.
The last couple of years. I mean, even guys who, like, I like as prospects, and they fall way further than you think, and then they're out of the league. I keep saying Kenley Chandler, but that's the most recent example of this. Where, like, I liked him a lot. He didn't last a year and a half. He was just out of the league, and it's like this guy. I mean, and it's not only size, but if you look up and down, you got to be. And look, the Hawks are one of the best small guards, if not the best small guard in the league, and it's like. He's an outlier, man. Speaking of outliers, like, you have to be crazy skilled to be able to do that at that size.
Well, because he really passes, Brad, and he shoots from, and I'll steal this from Rashad Phillips, he shoots from like the fourth level. Like, I don't think people realize how important that is for small guards to be able to shoot from that depth, to pull the defense out and then open up the floor even more. So
I do want to get to the G League guys, because that wasn't intentional, but we'll pair them together because they're the last two on my list. You mentioned Holland a second ago in comparison to Castle. That's a natural comparison. And then also, I feel like Modest gets compared to Risacher.
Yeah.
And then Holland gets compared to Castle. I don't know what that says about anybody, but it is what it is. But we can all agree that G League Ignite situation was not great this year for anybody involved. That hurts everybody. I have a pet theory that if those guys had gone to college, they'd probably be consensus top 4 picks or whatever. But what do you think of? Go wherever you want to on Holland and Buzelis, because on the right day, Holland looks like a guy who could be number one overall pick. He's got the physical tools for sure. Modest, same thing. Another highly regarded high school guy who was up there, top of the list. And then they had weird seasons. Yeah,
I mean, I said from the start, listen, I don't get much right, but I didn't think Matas should go to the Ignite. I didn't think he was physically ready. I thought he would have been better in college for just, production and stuff like that. Like, I didn't think he was ready for the physicality and those type of things. And that, like, I do want to, like, that caveat is important. That people need to understand that program was so bad. They got rid of it. The NBA said, we're done. We're not going to try to improve it. We're going to scrap it.
We give up.
We give up. They had no point guard with a bunch of wing forwards, off-ball players. And so I do give these guys a little bit of a bump because of that. I'll start real quick with Holland. I think him and Castle are naturally compared against, but they're completely different players. Like, Castle's high feel. Holland's probably biggest question mark is his feel. Yep. Neither of them shoot it real well. I think Holland's jump shot actually looks a little more fluid whenever he takes it. But there is I think Holland's probably the best athlete. I think you just talk about rim pressure, which I think is important in the NBA. I think Holland probably does that as good as anybody at the top of the draft. And then defensively, they're completely different defenders. Yep. Holland's impact comes with straight energy, a little bit frantic and frenetic at times. It's not always going to be super solid, but he plays hard. He's going to be disruptive. That's kind of how he does it on that end. I do think he's a little bit more of a high upside, low ceiling type of player because, like, these slashers, if they don't figure out how to shoot it, if the feel for the game really is questionable, and every time he drives, he's not selfish. I want to be very clear. Like, I have it like capitalized in my notes to make sure I emphasize it every time I talk about him. He's not selfish. He just doesn't always make the right decisions.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And I think I get betting on Holland. Like, I understand. I think John Hollinger has Holland number 1 on his board.
He does.
Right?
Yes.
And I actually get it. Like, I'm not saying he's right, but I get it, because if you look at just the league and just the physical tools, the wing size and the way that he plays as hard as he does, the character stuff's apparently fantastic. I never talked to the kid, but apparently he's got great off court reviews. All that package, like I get it, because like everyone's looking for that player, right? Everyone wants the 6'6", 6'7" monster physical wing like that. Why wouldn't you want that? But it's the polished stuff. The feel that you mentioned and the shooting. Those are the two questions with Ryan Holland for me. It's like, if both those are checked off as yeses, he goes, if not one, definitely the top 3 for me.
Yeah.
It's just those are questions.
He probably would be number 1 for me if I knew, even if I just knew he was going to shoot it. Cause then I think this is a 25.
Either one of those things would be good. Just pick one.
Cause then he's scoring 25 a night. And I know he's going to be crazy aggressive and, productive defensively.
Yep.
Buzelis is a guy I've been all over the place on. I didn't love him coming into the cycle. I've had people kind of talk me into him in terms of what he offers defensively with his size and his length. And here's where I've come around on Matas. Like, I don't think Buzelis is a wing at all. So this is what I told, like, Sam and I had this conversation where I don't like the Risacher Buzelis conversation is I think they're different types of players. I think Risacher is more of a wing and Buzelis is more of a forward. And so, like, some people may like, that's the same thing. To me, it means a little bit different. Like, Risacher is a 3 that will play some 4 eventually. Buzelis is a 4 who maybe plays as a small ball big at times later in his career if he ever figures out the physicality. But here's the thing with him. Can he shoot? Like, tell me whether or not Matas Buzelis can
love
shoot.
To know.
Because if he can actually space the floor, you're talking about a forward / like I say, he's not a big yet. Let's say 5 years down the road that can dribble, pass, and shoot. And we talk all the time about guys that can dribble, pass, and shoot and how effective that is in today's NBA. And on the other end, again, he has this linked low man rim protection. He was very disruptive with the Ignite in terms of steals and blocks. I like a lot of this stuff. Is he going to get physical, and can he actually make jump shots? And I'll tell you this, I've had a lot of conversations with people in all sorts of realms, like media, non-media, like everywhere in the space. And it's like 50-50. Some people are like, I've tracked every shot and I think he's going to shoot. And I've watched other people. I watched him shoot at the combine and it looked awful. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't even know what to think now.
Which one of those things? No, you're right. I mean, the dribble pass shoot thing is funny. I always think of Travis Schlenk because that was his ethos. He was a big dribble pass shoot guy. But yeah, same thing with Buzelis. I feel like if you took the optimistic viewpoint on particularly the shooting and the versatility, I could see him being the number 1 pick. Like, sure. It makes sense to me. It's just that Sam kind of gets about Holland and the situation, and just a little bit of there's just some weird tape there, and he's not quite as Holland kind of assert himself just physically in a way that some guys can't. Whereas like Buzelis isn't gonna be able to do that. He's got length for sure, and I think he makes good decisions. Like, but yeah. I mean, it's not just the shooting, but man, I would love to know what his baseline is, because I think Risacher is a safer bet to shoot. Just to be very clear,
I would agree. So if I looked at my top 9, because that's where my tier break is at, I think Reed is probably number 1.
Yeah,
Connect is probably 2, and then Risacher. And then I think there's like a tier break in terms of my belief in whether guys can really knock down shots or not.
Which makes sense. And, that's not all of everything, but if you're a team, like, look, the Hawks, this is a Hawks podcast. So it's like when they've had enough shooting around Trae Young, they've been really awesome. And when they haven't had enough shooting around Trae Young, it's not this simple, but it really kind of has been offensively. It's been a huge differentiator. And that's why I always have to bring it up, because you're trying to find that. Everyone wants to find that balance between shooting and defense. And if you can do both, that's why you're so valuable. I get all that. But I mean, that was a relatively quick rundown of all these top guys. We could do forever. I'm not going to make you stay forever. I do want to get to, because I have you here, I have to take advantage of your wealth of knowledge. I know you have some favorite players in the class that are not in the mix for number 1 overall. I can think of one of them off the top of your head. It's been kind of a joke on the podcast now, but it's true. but it could look. This could be lottery picks. This is just a non-number one overall pick segment where you can wave your flag on anybody you want to, because look, the Hawks might not have another pick. In fact, right now they have one pick in the draft, and it's number one overall. They could get back in though, so I'm not going to just ignore 2 through 58 in this draft. So, who do you like? Who are your guys, Bryce?
Yeah, so I do want to start with Dalton Connect, a guy that we've mentioned a couple times, and part of it's just the path he's taken to get to this point. So for your listeners that don't know, like I'm a JUCO kid. Before I went Division I, I played a couple years of Division I, and so I kind of have a soft spot for JUCO kids. Just getting to know Dalton Connect's story in terms of a late bloomer in high school, then went JUCO, then Northern Colorado, transferred to Tennessee, and then just went crazy there. Yeah. You know, he's not your normal 23-year-old in the trajectory of that, and so I love that he's getting top 10. So I like to mention him when I get a chance. The next guy I would go to is Deron Holmes II out of Dayton. I think this is a kid that is really good. He played in the A-10 where he doesn't get as much recognition, but that Dayton team was really good. And this, you know, you talk about dribble, pass, and shoot. I don't know that Deron gets as much dribble, pass, and shoot love as other bigs, because he shot the ball well from three this season. He can pass it a little bit. He can definitely put it on the deck if you go watch the film, and he was a really good defender. So I think Deron Holmes II is a definite first-round pick, and I think he's a guy that teams, whoever ends up with him, is he's going to be a very useful. I think he has enough skill. He can be that kind of tweener big, play a little bit 4, a little bit 5.
I've always liked him a lot too. I'm actually glad people have not started to, but I think he's kind of risen for a lot of people in the last however long. And I'm like, I love the guy. I think he was obviously an awesome college player, which is not always what this is about. And man, you touched on it, the Connect story is just incredible. The fact that he performed the way he did, not even just the shoot, because the shooting is obvious, but like the scoring.
Yes.
To do that at the SEC level, coming from literally Division II the previous year, is like, has it ever happened to anyone? I don't even know. Like in the modern era, has anyone ever done that?
I talked to someone before the season, and they just said, Bryce, he's a 3-level bucket getter at any level. Like, it's not just like they were.
That is apparent now.
Yeah. Yeah. He's like, it's not even going to just be the SEC. It's going to be in the NBA. Like, he can get buckets. The question is, can he guard?
Can he guard? Yes. If he was, I do wonder if he was 19, if people would be like putting the cape on. You know, I'm not saying they would, but you know, I wonder if he was 20, if people would have him 5 spots higher.
And this is why I've had him this high. I think most people have him top 10 now. I had him top 10 way before a lot. Like, we did a mock. I took him 7 to Portland, and Sam kind of gave me some crap about it. And then, you know, a month later, that's where, you know, that's a really popular spot for him. And it was because of, I feel bad doing this to Kevin McCullough every time. There's Kevin McCullough is the same age. The difference is Kevin McCullough has 6 years of high level Division I basketball, weight training, strength training, nutrition, all of those things. And he went through the draft process twice already to get the feedback and all. Connect was JUCO. And listen, I'm a JUCO kid. I love JUCO. My former assistant just won the JUCO national championship. Like, I love that, but it's not the same. It just straight up is not the same. And then, like, say, a lower level Division I school where, again, it's not the same there at Northern Colorado. And he didn't even get 12 months at Tennessee. You know, and here's the thing. I do know he went to Tennessee because of the defense. Like, that is definitely a reason he chose, and because he loved Kevin Durant, and Rick Barnes obviously coached Kevin Durant. Right. But he went to Tennessee to be like, learn to play defense and all of that. And then he had to be their entire offense. Like, how much energy did that kid have left to play defense during his games at Tennessee? So I give him that was a long way of saying I give him a little bit more leash than your normal 23-year-old.
No, that makes sense for sure. And you're right. I mean, he carried a huge workload offensively. And I always say that, you know, I'm not always about Trey because of a lot of locally, because of Trey. It's like the talking point of how much can you do defensively when you have to do so much on offense. So that's always been a talking thing. Do you have favorite second round picks or potential like non-top 20 guys? Because I think if the Hawks just try to spin it to the Hawks a little bit, if the Hawks get back in this draft, they could trade down from 1, I suppose, but they also could end up getting back in with a future pick or whatever, somewhere in that 30s or 40 range. I know Peyton Sanford's on your list because that's your favorite guy from Game Theory, but you can talk about him if you want to. Anybody else that you love or that you feel like you're super high on compared to everybody else?
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about Peyton and just Oso Ighodaro is a guy like if the Hawks don't take Alex Sarr #1, maybe Oso's a guy that could come in
Marquette.
and yeah, if they did move on from Capella and then Oso's a guy like completely different type of player, like can't shoot at all, like at all. Oso can't at all. But he can really pass, short roll float, and he has more vertical pop than what he gets credit for. Like he is a guy I think that would come in, catch lobs. All of that. I like Keyshawn Johnson out of Arizona, older player, come in, play on the wing. And then, let's do Peyton. So Peyton Sandford, I've like continued to say the best shooter in the draft. Listen, people are going to go pull up his combine numbers and be like, oh, he didn't like, I don't care.
Me, by the way, me either. I'm not as invested as you are. Combine shooting numbers for shooters, I do not care. I
don't care. And I said this on Vicini's, and this is like the most arrogant thing I'll ever say publicly. But if you gave me 2 weeks, like I could go get a video of me hitting a pretty good number of threes out of 50. And I'm 37 years old, was a mid-30s 3-point shooter, Division I. Like I was at a low level. So like my point is, like you can train for those things, and I just don't value him as much as Sanford. I said 600. He's taken 500 3-pointers in his career. This last year alone, he took almost 250, shot 38%, and over 100 free throw attempts and shot 91%. Like
some hard shots too, by the way, taking some difficult attempts.
And this is no shot at Iowa or anything like that. He was the main focus of defenses, and it wasn't like he wasn't getting. Again, I'm not trying to take shots like at Alex Caravan, but he wasn't at Connecticut getting wide open looks because he had crazy amount of talent to ride him. Like insane attempts, some of the ones he had to take. And so like, I think the kid can really, really shoot it. He's shown enough of an ability to attack closeouts. And then I think what he did really well this year was he went and got impactful on the boards. So people like, he didn't have a great combine testing athletically. He averaged 6.6 rebounds in the Big Ten, Brad, in the Big Ten. 6.6 rebounds. So I don't care what his vertical was or anything else. He averaged almost 7 rebounds in the Big Ten. And I think he got better defensively. He's not going to be like a plus level defender, but even if he's neutral with the floor spacing, I think that's valuable.
Yeah. And on the few draft shows I did pre-lottery, Ryan Dunn is my Peyton Sandford.
Sure.
I love Ryan Dunn.
Yeah.
And by the way, I know how bad he is on offense. I understand. People tell me, I was like, I know how bad he is. I've watched him a lot. He doesn't really do anything well on offense at the moment. I don't care. Figure it out. I hope he goes to like somewhere with a shot doctor. New Orleans. Don't they have a great shot doctor in New Orleans? Yeah.
In Oklahoma City, I think. Here's my thing with, you know what? At a certain point, isn't Ryan Dunn a really valuable 82-game player? Like at some point, okay, maybe you just draft him. Like, you know what? He's never going to play in the playoffs. But that dude defensively, whenever the schemes and, all of that aren't as locked in, is going to be valuable to us for 82 games. And more after watching these playoffs, I think 82-game players matter. We've talked so much about Steph Curry being tired, LeBron James being tired, the Knicks players being tired, the Nuggets players being tired because of how many minutes these guys had to play in the regular season. I'm not saying you take an 82-game player in the lottery, maybe not even in the first round, but at some point, guys that you just, they can go get buckets for 82 games or they can defend their butts off for 82 games. I think at some point that becomes valuable.
Oh, yeah. And look, I've been banging this drum for a long time. The Hawks, they think they have it with Mo Gay, who they like a lot from last year.
Sure.
They love Mo Gay, but in the last 10 years, the Hawks haven't really found a single contributor in the second round.
Yeah.
The last guy that they found in the second round was Mike Muscala, which tells you how long ago it's been. And Mike's still in the league. Shouts to Mike, but like it's been a long time.
I coached against Mike Muscala. That's how long ago.
And there you have it.
I spent 1 year coaching in the Patriot League after I graduated, and CJ McCollum, Mike Muscala.
There you go. Game planning for those guys. Anyway, I will not take up any more of your time, Bryce. You were very gracious with a lot of time for me, so I really appreciate it. We've done it already, but please plug anything you like to. I know you are very busy. Pistons stuff is also relevant. I know it's a Hawks podcast, but listen, the Pistons are a relevant team. It's an Eastern Conference rival. Sure. Might be a trade partner.
Rivals. I don't know.
It's too strong. I understand. it might be a trade partner. I mean, I've seen some fake trades between the Pistons and the Hawks. It's like there's some stuff going on there.
DeJounte Murray may not have gotten traded to the Detroit Pistons in this mock that I did.
I've heard that a few times as a potential thing. Not like super intel based, but like it's if you take it like just think about it for a second. It's like, all right, him and Cade kind of make some sense together.
Maybe.
I can see it.
So so at Motor City Hoops on Twitter, you can find all the stuff I do. I don't tweet out too crazy much about the Pistons. Mostly it's just content stuff. The Pistons Pulse podcast, if you do want some, we're doing a mock actually on Tuesday. If you guys want to tune in, so we'd be making a selection for the Hawks. And then Game Theory with Sam Vecini a couple of times a week. I find it on YouTube. And then I do put out some interesting stuff on Substack, or I think it's interesting. So the Motor City Hoops Substack is a little more Piston specific, or the Basketball Bulletin. And again, that's with Trevor Lane and Keith Smith, who have the front office show. And I put out all my scouts, and I think I put out my 30th scout today. These are just individual scouts on the draft. So if you're into the draft, plus obviously Trevor and Keith contribute over there, you can check that out as well. The Basketball Bulletin.
You're a very busy man. It sounds like my resume. I have like 5 things to plug every time I do a podcast. Like that's probably enough for now. But no, thank you again, Bryce. I really do appreciate it, man. Great insight. Hopefully we'll have more great insight coming up on this podcast, but they have a high billing now that sets you down on the show. As for everybody else, please subscribe to the podcast. Follow Bryce's work. We'll see you all next time.